Your host, the WineShark, in a not quite so live format this week because reasons. Well, which I'll probably go on live and explain a little bit later, but got some family stuff to take care of, so I wanted to record the show a bit early. So I hope everybody's having a great week. It is still nearly fall-like weather here in my part of the world, which has been so fantastic. Many fun things in the progress of food world that I want to start sharing with you guys coming up here pretty soon. Fall menu for the WineShark on-site tastings is coming out, and I want to get some feedback and ideas from you guys. I have a couple of things I want to throw out and see what kind of thing sticks in your particular cravings and imagination when you think fall flavors. But today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about, is it ready to drink? And this is going to be a kind of a weird two-part show because, I do things kind of flighty of fancy on occasion, well, more than one occasion. Today's show is actually going to hallmark back to a show we did a month ago when we talked about boombox. We're going to talk about RTD cocktails today, ready-to-drink cocktails. I saw something at the store the other day, wanted to fancy it a try, and figured I would roll back to the topic and talk about actual spirits-based RTDs. But when I was doing the naming for the show, I realized that is it ready to drink is actually a pretty good topic for us to cover again when we talk about when is your wine ready to drink, rather than mostly thinking about wines when you're laying them down to age or wines that are a little bit older. So next topic for next week, we will actually be covering that. We'll talk about vintage charts again and things like that. But for today, we're going to talk about spirits and spirits-based cocktails, the ready-to-drink segment. Kind of an off thing for WineShark, if you ask me. But you know what? I've always said that I like wine, I like beer, I like cocktails. It's all kind of part of my purview. So I will tell you now that today we're going to try the Troop Rum Mojitos, these ready-to-drink cocktails. So let's go back just a bit and talk about what we talked about a month ago. We talked about boombox and the idea of what is an RTD, because that's itself is kind of nebulous. So before we talked mostly about wine-based beverages, the OTS, or other than standard wine. Beatbox, not boombox. I've been going to correct myself. The beatbox wines. That whole topic was really cool because those are wine-based to get their alcohol, and they form a very small but interesting segment. We also talked about flavor malt beverages, which is kind of the gorilla in the room of most of the stuff that you think of when you think of this category falls into this. They're made alcoholic with malt. And they have like 91% of the market share. This is most of your hard seltzers and many of your cocktail-like objects. And I'll kind of circle back to that in a minute. There's the weird small category of IRCs, or internal revenue code classified stuff. These are based on sugar-based beverages where they have sugar to make alcohol, but can also include seltzers with spirits as well. So they're a weird tax catch-all category that sits somewhere in between FMBs and RTDs. But for this conversation, when I say RTD, I'm talking about spirits-based cocktails. Okay. Now, cans is something I mentioned before, but in doing a little bit more industry research, cans are and packaging is something that's actually pretty variable throughout this category, depending on how the brand is trying to position itself within its particular category. So, for instance, the small format single serving can that we're seeing a lot of, this is very, very popular and has kind of become the go-to standard when we think about RTDs. But I've heard of things, everything they do bag and box, they do simple boxes, they do even large format things. I saw something where they had a Negroni fountain that you could buy for it was like 200 ounces of a Negroni fountain or something like that. Anyway, the idea is RTDs are really kind of expanding. This also spirits-based RTDs is only about 8% of the market, so much, much smaller than the flavored malt beverage category. But there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, spirits-based cocktails get taxed at a much, much higher rate than their wine or malt or even their sugar-based competitors. Okay, $13.50 per proof gallon. So $13.50 per proof. Now this is a 10% ABV, so this is 20 proof. That kind of gives you a sense on how much they're being taxed. Now that goes down to about $1 for up to 16% ABV, things like wines and wine coolers and things like that. So it's much cheaper to produce those other styles, even if you're trying to get an alcohol point of, in a reasonable, say, 20 proof range. See, 10% ABV, this is basically straight up in the wine category. And I think most of us don't think about that when we think about how we consume our cocktails. The rum mojito that we're having today, if you think about the amount of rum you're putting in, where you put in, say, an ounce and a half of rum and 4 ounces of, say, soda or spritzer, you're changing the ratio. We don't really have a good head for what our alcohol by volume is for our cocktails because we don't think about it. We simply think about consuming a cocktail at a time. This, by the way, is a 200 milliliter format that we're going to be consuming today. So, we have our wonderful format here. But in RTDs, this is where I think that where the growth has been slower, but but I think they have a finer point on their target market. Originally, this was kind of started by bartenders wanting to can craft cocktails and make them easily available to consumers. It started back about 2017 or so, and then really took off as a sub-market segment during the pandemic. According to data from a group called Mintel, 226% growth between 2016 and 2021, which was far exceeding their actual expectations. They were thinking something more along the line of 24 to 26%. So the pandemic obviously had this big impact where nobody was going out. People having alcohol delivered. They wanted cocktails, and they weren't necessarily cocktail people. And this whole segment was right there. Convenience, ease, and what better on your couch with the sorrow of isolation than a ready-to-drink cocktail. So, but anyway, the idea that these are ready-to-drink is something I wanted to experience for myself because I hadn't had an opportunity. I've had lots of flavor malt beverages over the course of the last couple of years. I'm a really big fan of some of the FMB style cocktail like objects. For instance, the Cayman Jack Cuban mojitos, or once upon a time they even had a Captain Morgan brand, a Captain Morgan Silver mojitos that were basically in bottle, but those were not spirits based. Both of those are malt based beverages. Now they have around a 5 to 6% alcohol by volume. So they're very casual, very light, very easy to drink. I loved them as a poolside, hot weather, alternative to beer or wine or making myself a cocktail. And I still to this day really, really enjoy them. So that's kind of why I chose, of the 4 or 5 of these on the shelf, those that I showed for the one that I chose for the show was something that I had kind of another analog for. I wanted to see how this tasted compared to the FMB version that I tasted, compared to, say, the actual real cocktails that I've made when I do enjoy a mojito. So before we get much more on that, let's take a look. Well, actually, we can do it as part of the grocery store grab because we're going to format the show the same way. But we'll get on to actually tasting and discussing about those after we stop for a wine quiz. Now, because this isn't live, I'm just going to give you brief pauses in our little wine quiz. But let me reach back into the category here. So our Wine Wars little wine quiz here is a fun way to kind of practice our knowledge and go through the ideas, seeing whether you can stump your chump and find out how much fun little wine knowledge we have. Very similar to many trivia games, we've got several categories here. Vine to Vino, which is all about growing grapes, making wine, and worldwide wine production. We've got the Graposphere, which is about grape varieties, their wines, and their geography. We've got the Wine Cellar, which is about selecting, storing, and serving or tasting wine. Wine and Food, which is about cooking with wine to serve with wine pairings, and wine service. And then finally, the catch-all category of Cork Culture, which is wine people, wine business, arts, sciences, and trivia. So let us see what our wine quiz brings for us today. Number 1. What part of the grape gives red wine its color? Is it the pulp, the seeds, or the skin? Okay, think about a red wine grape, right? The part's got the skin on the outside, it's got pulp in the middle, and it's got seeds in the very, very center. Which one of those gives red wine its color? And the answer, by the way, is skin. So it's that dark outside layer that has all the wonderful anthocyanins that become wonderful red wine. Okay. Next up, true or false? A grape variety is expected to retain basic varietal characteristics wherever it is grown in the world and however it is vinified. Ooh, that's a really broad category there at the end. So, true false question, right? So it's a 50-50 shot here. But it's a grape variety is expected to retain basic varietal characteristics. That's seems reasonable. Wherever it is grown, that's kind of the point. Although they do change subtle flavors, their basic varietal characteristics should remain. But in the world, is wherever it's grown in the world, but this is the weird one, and however it's vinified. That, I guess that we keep vinified being pretty narrow, meaning whatever winemaking techniques you use, let's say, minor things like fermentation temperature or whether you destem or not. But if you include that up to mean things like, say, making fortified wines out of something, that might be a little odd. But let's assume it's not an edge case. The answer here, I'm going to say, should be true. Yes, it says true. So if you grow a Cabernet Franc grape, you should expect that Cabernet Franc grape could have Cabernet Franc characteristics, whether you grow it in South Africa, whether you grow it in the Loire Valley of France, or whether you grow it in Napa Valley. So that's the whole point of the varietal thing, is you're supposed to be able to identify it, what we call typicity. All right, next question. What term is used for wine that is neither dry nor sweet? What is the term used for wine that is neither dry nor sweet? Now, I can think of a couple examples in different languages, but in English, we usually refer to them as off-dry. Yeah, they're off-dry. Those are usually anywhere between 12 to 35, 36 grams per liter of sugar. To give you a sense of what an off-dry wine should taste like, it's that slightly sweet flavor that you kind of associate with a piece of fresh fruit, like when you bite into an apple. It's not nearly as sweet as dessert wines. Dessert wines are like 150. And that, by the way, is much more equivalent to like a soda, like a Coca-Cola, which is about that same range. So even off-dry wines, when some people go, oh, this is so sweet, I'm like, well, it's not. It's fruity, but it's not really that sweet. So not much sugar to go on there. All right. Which is the more important consideration in matching wine and food? The color or the weight? Light-bodied, medium-bodied, full-bodied of the wine. Is it more about color or is it about body? Answer, it's all about body. Yeah. Weight. This is delicate flavored foods with light-bodied wine, hearty dishes with full-bodied wine. Yeah, this is what we the kind of the broad rule we talk about matching intensity. You don't want a really big, bold, huge wine with a very subtle, gentle food, or vice versa, because they can tend to run over one another. You want to keep those things in the right range. Last but not least, which caused Italian authorities to seize Brunello di Montalcino wines in 2008? Was it creditors, contaminated wine, or suspicious grape use? First, I want to know what the heck in Italy suspicious grape use qualifies as. Like, hey man, you're using that grape in a very suspicious way. Well, if they're going to seize Brunello al Montalcino, I'm betting it has to do with creditors. That's going to be my guess. It's creditors, contaminated wine, or suspicious grape use. No, apparently it was suspicious grape use. DOCG regulations require that Brunello di Montalcino contain only Sangiovese grapes from registered vineyards. So I wonder whether they were using non-standard, non-Sangio grapes, or whether they were basically getting grapes from other places and bringing them in. So the Denominazione Origine Controllata Garantita says, busted, your grapes are suspicious. So now we know what suspicious grape use is in Italy. Well, 4 out of 5 ain't bad. Good thing for the wine quiz today. Always some fun. All right. So let's get on to the grocery store grab, which in this case, as I've said, is Troop's Rum Mojito. Not a wine of the week at all, but the basic premise of the grocery store grab is to get the best value per dollar found at non-specialty and non-big box retailers. We reward well-packaged wines that show us what's in the bottle, what the wine tastes like, and basically can help us serve ourselves at the store selection, since we may not have expert advice ready to hand when it comes to places like the grocery store. Now, #/ little violation here. This was not purchased at the grocery store. This was a grab actually from Total Wine. Since grocery stores in Texas do not sell spirits, we have to have separate stores. So I was buying wine and other things at the Total Wine that's nearby me when I saw this item and had the inspiration for the show. So, caveat to me. However, in my selection of which one of these types of objects I was going to do, packaging was still important to me. So let's take a look real quick at the actual packaging for this. So Troop is what caught my attention. This is their Rum Mojito. They are a 4-pack box of 200 milliliter servings. Ooh. Although you might want to not breathe them in there, Glenn. Anyway, you can see here on the side of the box, there's some good information on the side of the box. It tells us all about the cocktail. That was the thing that actually caught my attention. There were 4 different selections that they had. I ended up on the mojito, as I said, because I wanted a rough equivalent to something else, so that I had a comparison point. But when we look at the cans up close, check this out. Back of each and every can has this great information on it. It says what it is. It's a rum mojito. Has a little cool icon. It says check it out. It's mint and lime. It tells you the ingredients: rum, lime, mint, soda water, and cane sugar. It's got its ABV plainly stated, who makes it, and the size. But it's a mojito made with rum, very clearly saying that this is a true spirits ready-to-drink cocktail. I think their packaging is slick. I think it's very, each one of the cocktails has a slightly different color theme, but overall their design aesthetic is fantastic. Shows they put a lot of effort into making their product really stand out, etc. So, and the 200 milliliter size. So this is, narrow like a Red Bull can, but shorter. I guess it's maybe what a regular Red Bull can looks like. I think there's about 275 milliliters. This is 200. But it basically comes out to, with my ice cubes, about 1 cocktail per. So that's 4 drinks. These are $14 for a 4-pack. Okay, so 4 drinks for $14. Not really a bad price at all when you're talking about, if you were to order one of these at a bar, if you're getting real rum, etc., that's a very reasonable price. Now, the weird part is comparing that to something like, say, craft beers, where you're looking in, say, the $11 to $15 per 6-pack range, but the ABV volume is different. This is double the ABV. So, anyway, kind of cool. Really like their packaging. Talks about, it talks about what it is, what's in the package. It's specific. They don't necessarily describe the flavor words of what's going on. So, for instance, if you didn't know what was in a mojito, at least they told you the ingredients. Same sort of things. I think they had a bourbon smash, and I don't remember the other 2 cocktails. It was a bourbon smash and something else. But that's why, again, as I said, I wanted to try this because I wanted to compare it to my Cayman Jack Cuban mojitos. So, that being said, you've already heard me choke on it for once, but as a cocktail, so is it ready to drink? Would this experience be identical or close enough to what I would taste or expect out of a cocktail that I made by hand? The answer there is ish. One of the things I think that is difficult about this particular cocktail to make is infusing that flavor of lime and mint and having them taste fresh. To me, comparatively to the other Cuban mojitos that I enjoy, this is a little on the bitter side. This has more lime and less mint. I don't taste much of the mint flavor. Then again, I do know that there's probably more base sugar added to the other mojitos to kind of balance things out. This is comparatively dry to those others. It is quite tasty, and the rum definitely has a pop, and so does the lime. The only part I'm missing, I think, is I want to figure out how to capture that moment of mint, which when you make cocktails like this, you're muddling that mint and opening up those oils. Those things are pretty volatile. I don't know how well they last within the cocktail and how that little bit of fresh mint flavor is how to make that durable. I mean, I'm sure there's something to the cocktail science of that I would have to look into. But if the only complaint that I have is that it's only a little bit minty and not a lot, it's a pretty mild complaint. When it comes to the actual, the ABV taste, you taste a little hint of the alcohol, but not a ton, right? It's a very well balanced cocktail, as if it was, like I said, as if it was made directly for you. So, is it well executed? Yeah, this is really pretty cool. I mean, the idea that this is something that you can just pop open a can and pour yourself a cocktail I can see why people are paying for the convenience. I've known it for a while, but I got to underline, getting cocktails into the mix with beer and wine on a grocery store shelf is a big deal for the cocktail world. A lot of people are intimidated by the hundreds of multi-spectral bottles of booze over there. Anything past, I put this into my other thing. I put my margarita mix in the blender and I make a margarita, or I put the vodka into my OJ for my screwdrivers, or I put the rum into my Coke for my Cuba Libre. That's, as a lot of people, that's as far as their cocktail knowledge goes. They're not getting into the deep mixology end of things, and so RTDs are at least a gateway for people to try this. And these products, I think, are doing a pretty good job of representing them. Is it on style? Yes, that definitely I would identify that. Although this is that part where, because of the mint part, I'm like, hang on, what am I aiming at here? What am I tasting? And so the mint part would be the only part that I would improve. Is it worth the price tag? Oh yeah, $14 for four of these. I mean, four drinks for $14. I think is a totally reasonable price to pay. And I think, as I said, the packaging is great. It's mobile. This is great because they're in cans. They're poolside. I mean, if you wanted, you could drink them right out of the can. You don't have to throw them on ice like I did. I just did that for the purpose of the show. So convenient, easy use, price tag absolutely fits the bill quite perfectly. So anyway, get out there and go find some RTDs. And look for actual spirit-based cocktails. Try a couple of things that either you may have a favorite. See if you like them. Whether there's the first ones that I've seen, a lot of them put the classic cocktails. We're talking about old fashions, Manhattans, martinis, mojitos, things like that in a can. See what it's like. I think some cocktails benefit from being married for long periods of time. If you ever had aged cocktails at a local cocktail joint of yours, they can be a really interesting experience, especially if they're like aged in special oak or something like that. But even just the concept of letting the flavors of the drink marry over time is a different way to experience it. Is it better or worse? I would say it's neither here nor there. It's one thing to have someone that's fresh made and ready to go, but the idea of having the convenience to have one when you're out and about, that's pretty darn cool as well. So, all right, upcoming events. Still waiting to hear back from Reunion Tower. I'm hoping that we get the shows that are coming up here. It is now into October, so hopefully we've got some shows later this month for October, November, December here in the Dallas area. So we're going to be doing a kind of a party-style event down at Reunion Tower in the evenings is the hope, but I will let you know and let you know when and if tickets go on sale. It is holiday season. For those of you that are interested in hosting your own holiday parties of any shape or form, please do get on my calendar now. We are booking up quite quickly. So I absolutely would love to see every one of you and celebrate your fall and holiday seasons with you. But to make that happen, make sure you get on the calendar. It costs you nothing to get on the calendar. Go to wineshark.com, hit book your tasting, get on the calendar quickly, and then we can discuss all the details for things like that. So I hope to see you at one of those here pretty soon. You guys enjoy. Go find yourself an RTD. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button and subscribe and share with a wine-loving friend. If you really like us, join us over on Patreon. And I thought I'd say thank you to all of our patrons for all the support that you guys give me and help keeping the show running for weird and funky experiments like canned mojitos. So until next time, I've been your wine shark. Cheers.